Good morning. Hi, Natasha.
Morning.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Monday morning talk where Natasha and I will be going through a few talks and discussions and foundational elements of what it means to be healthy, the essential requirements, and just an overview of how we view health and wellness. Thank you so much, Natasha, for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here as my first guest to discuss health. And over the years, and I really have lost track of how long it's been, but Natasha has always been my go-to person when I have struggles with finding the right protocol, or when I want to discuss a tricky client, or when I had any particular questions about biochemistry and the application of various nutrients. And so she has really proven to be one of my biggest teachers and also an amazing friend and so generous with her knowledge. So thank you so much for joining, and please just give us an introduction as to where you see yourself in this world of wellness.
Thank you, Em. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, our relationship goes back a number of years now, and I think like yourself, I consider myself a scholar of life, and in particular wellness. I think our journey never ends. We're always learning, we're always growing, we're always changing, and it's been a fascinating road to travel for myself, and also with practitioners such as yourself, to see how far we've come, how our knowledge has grown, and how we've actually influenced each other, supported each other. So I don't really see myself as your go-to person, because every time I'm with you, I learn. I learn from you, and I have an opportunity to apply the knowledge that we've gained over the years in this realm of wellness, and in particular functional medicine, which I think is still a fairly new concept in South Africa, maybe not so much in the world, but definitely here. And we are definitely frontiers. We are definitely blazing a way for practitioners to come. But a little bit about myself. I am a homeopath, as you know. I practiced for a decade, and was very fortunate to start a career with AmiPro. As you know, AmiPro is a wellness company, and we distribute the AmiPro range as well as the Metagenics nutraceutical range. But more than that, we have brought functional medicine to South Africa. We started functional medicine South Africa, I think, in 2012. And through that, we've really leveraged the power of education and continue to do so, to bring nutrition back into the practice setting, which is where it belongs. And yeah, I'm by no means where I want to be in terms of my knowledge base, because I think, as you'll agree with me, that we can never know everything. Our journey for knowledge and knowledge acquisition, and then the application of that knowledge, never ends. So very humbled by the experience, and very humbled by people like you, amazing people like you, who welcome me into your circle and are prepared to share your space with me.
That what you're saying about learning and how the functional medicine world and the world of science and the world of health and the world of nutrition, it has changed so much in my time. The things that I learned in the 80s when I did my BSc degree in dietetics is almost the opposite of what we are advising now. And I think the one thing that we have learned, and that I know that we share, is that you can never get stuck in a way of thinking when it comes to health. It's a very dynamic field, and it can change. Not just the foundation of it, but the way that you apply it, because people are so different. the individual requirements and the individual ways in which health can be expressed in one person versus the next, requires one to have an open mind and to say, okay, this is how I do this with you, but how am I going to apply similar principles that make it different for someone else? That being said, I felt the need to talk about the basics of health, the foundation of wellness, the main considerations that anybody and everybody should sort of make notes of and think, okay, if every day or every week I apply these principles, then I can affect my well-being, my health, and my outcome. Because what we are trying to teach people is to work preventatively. It's not to always just react when something goes wrong. Is to say, what can I do to prevent things from going wrong? How do I maintain this amazing vessel that is my body and my health so that it serves me well and so it doesn't break down? And that's what I wanted today's talk to cover, is these foundational aspects, the small little things that we can do every day, but they actually make a big difference in the long run.
Right. And I think what you said there is so pertinent. The whole thing about it's different for different people. And this is where precision medicine comes into play. Because yes, we're going to be talking about some of the foundational things. There is a little bit of a framework that you build upon. So there are going to be fundamental things that are similar across patients and applying the knowledge of functional medicine, functional nutrition, but certainly this is all about precision medicine. It's about understanding that no two individuals are the same, and that even though we're building from a similar base, we end up with a protocol, with a management program, and with an intervention that might be completely different, based entirely on that person's needs and where they are. So that's very important. So I think there's a very real understanding of, yes, there are foundational things we can talk about, but this is why it is so important to find a functional medicine practitioner that can then take you to that point of precision, which will then make a difference for you, because ultimately it's results driven. That's what we want to achieve. But getting back to the concept of wellness, I think a good place to start is to maybe define or attempt to define this thing called wellness. And for me, if I have to think about it, because I've had the privilege of forever, 20 years plus, being taught by amazing teachers and people with so much wisdom. But I suppose if I have to make it my own and describe my sentiments around what it means to be well and what wellness really is, for me, wellness is the result of active efforts towards well-being. And so for me, what that means is there needs to be an awareness of self. There needs to be an awareness of one's physical, one's mental, emotional, and for some individuals, their spiritual self and the needs of all those components. So the effort that I'm talking about is active efforts in the direction of all those areas that serve and support all those areas. And then the result of that is wellness. Now, because of that, then for me, wellness is a story. It's a bit like, if you can imagine that wellness is a storybook, and there are different chapters in that storybook, and we have to develop all the characters in each chapter, and we need to nurture that story throughout its entirety so that at the end of the day it culminates in a beautiful story told. And that's really what wellness is like for me. When you recognize, first of all, that there should be this awareness, you should then automatically strive every day, and the little decisions that you make to not only reconnect with those parts, but also to serve those parts. And so that's my definition of wellness. And because of that, it is different for different people. And it kind of happens at different speeds for people. Some people will take a lot longer to connect with that awareness and understand that wellness isn't just the absence of symptoms. Even if you go onto the World Health Organization's page, which by my understanding, it's a conservative place to go and look for information, you know, and even they will say that wellness is more than just the absence of symptoms. And I think that's a big thing to break away from. It's an old idea, like you said, back in the day when you now qualified, the way we were taught is very differently to how we've come to understand things today. And it really is not this wellness for me, is not this indifferent space where we don't feel anything, we don't have symptoms. In fact, you can have wellness and you can have vitality, but because of that, you're going to produce really good fevers when you get sick.
Yes.
If you eat food that's not wholesome and nourishing, you are going to perhaps get a bit of bloating or cramping. You might even get a runny stool because it's the body so in tune, doing what it needs to do to tell you, no, I don't want that. That doesn't serve me. So it's really not the absence of symptoms that we're looking for in terms of our definition of wellness. A person that's well for me is a person that's connected. They're connected to themselves, they're connected to others, and they're connecting with the natural world and in some degree the unnatural world around them. And they're then able to use what works for them and avoid what doesn't. So in a nutshell, very personal and very different for everybody that meets you. You might have that person that comes into your practice that says, all I want is for my sinusitis to clear up. That for me would mean everything. And then you do have another person that's willing to come and do a little bit more work and discover who they are and discover what true embrace feels like when you really embrace yourself, embrace others, and embrace this world that you're in. And that journey is extremely rewarding, not only for the patient, but as you know, for us as practitioners as well. So
absolutely,
a complex journey, but a beautiful one nonetheless.
I love that. And it's, you almost make it sound quite poetic. And that's, you know, something that one can take home and say, wow, I've never actually considered it like that. And yes, in the early days when I started listening to Patrick Holford, and he really put nutrition on the map for me, because even though I had studied dietetics, I didn't have an appreciation for nutrition. I mean, it's ironic. And he mentioned similar things about health and well-being. You know, is it when you don't have the symptoms that you are well? Is it when you're not in ICU that it means that you're healthy? And we know that that's not true, because we see a lot of people who are walking around, they're sort of functioning, they can show up every day at work, but they're not well. And the symbol I like to use, just to explain to my clients sometimes how I see it, is like with a vehicle, with a car, that it's not one thing that makes a car go well. It's not just the fuel or just air in one tire or the fact that the battery has been charged. It's when all these elements are working together in harmony and optimally, that this vehicle goes well all the time. So
and that word optimal, Emma, is such a, that for me sums it all up, because that's really what we're striving for in terms of a wellness approach concerned with well-being, is to liberate the person's optimal potential.
Yes.
And so many patients assume that as you get older, pain, inflammation, inflammaging, all of those things are, well, of course they're going to have arthritis. I mean, they're old. And actually what we're discovering, even in the world of biohacking, is that all those things are choices. They are optional. We don't have to go that way. And yeah, the word optimization for me is definitely, I think that's going to be the medicine of the future. People are going to not necessarily knock on your door because they have irritable bowel syndrome, or they have lupus, or they have rheumatoid. They might knock on your door and say, I'm functional, but I want to be better. I want to think faster. I want to sleep better. I want to run faster. I want to look better. I want to. So, I mean, the opportunities are there. And it's about changing the mindset of, I suppose, the average person out there to understand that the scope of wellness can be literally, let me just solve your problem here, this micro problem, or let's see how far we can take this. And get you to a point where, like you say, you are functioning at optimum every day.
And also, I think what clients learn and what I try to teach people when I work with them is that your health didn't disappear overnight. It's a slow process. So people might feel well in their late teens or in their early 20s, maybe not, maybe even earlier than that. You feel well, you have energy, you have vitality, you can play sport, you can think. And then as you start losing this edge because of whatever, it could be some chronic thing that's related to gut health that now starts to implicate on the way you think, the way you assimilate nutrients, etc. So, but it's a slow process. And so you don't wake up one morning saying, oh, I was well yesterday and today I'm unwell, unless you've obviously got an acute infection that you're fighting. But the road back to that optimal state can take a long time. And sometimes people feel a lot better within days or within weeks. But what's always interesting for me is when people start to get better, they say, I've actually forgotten what it was like to feel this well. Because I got used to not functioning at this optimal level. I got used to feeling sort of okay, but not great, and just accepting it, because thinking, well, it's because I'm stressed, or it's because I'm a bit older. And so that's really exciting to know that you can get back to that optimal state if you apply the principles and if you really look at
I think what you say there is so pertinent, because people move out of the situation where it's all about thriving. Like when you're younger, none of us leave our mother's wombs and say we're just going to survive. I just want a life of survival. We have dreams, we have aspirations, we have hopes. We want to be things, we want to go places, we want to do things with our life. So along the line, somewhere down the road, a lot of that gets lost. And I think there are many instances in life where things happen, even just things like for a woman having children, how that profoundly changes not only her psyche, but her physiology. And she's just expected, to get back that chutzpah that she had before she had children, before she underwent those extreme physical changes. I think and a lot of times society today also, it's like an unseen badge that you just put on you, because the more busy you are, the more stressed you are, the more adversity you can face, and you can just carry on going. It's almost like you get rewarded for that. Society doesn't really reward in a connectedness. It doesn't really reward a person that's self-aware and says, no, I'm not doing that because today I need rest. Or no, I can't meet you for a drink after work because actually, you know what? I've decided to drink less. Or, society doesn't reward that kind of behavior. We are kind of told to very subliminally just have this fast-paced life, and it comes at the cost of that connectedness to ourselves. And then we land up one day going, I've just been surviving for the last how many years? What has happened? And that's, of course, where where practitioners such as yourself come and you can come in on your white horse and you can rescue them, if they are willing to be active participants, though, because like I said, wellness is the result of action. And that is something I think you're not going to get at the bottom of prescriptive medication. You know, that action, that to action is the everyday wake up, make the right decisions. And some days you're not necessarily going to make the best decision, but understanding that just because you made a choice here that perhaps isn't the greatest and didn't serve you doesn't mean it's now all or nothing. You know, you're just you're literally just a decision away from changing your life. So it's a very powerful place to be in if you think about it like that, rather than, oh, well, it's happening to me. This is just it, you know.
So when we mention this, what are the ways that we can change the outcome? What are the things that we should consider where change is possible?
So to keep things simple, I actually think one of the best ways, and this comes from, again, another teacher, an amazing teacher, Dr. Alex Vasquez, and he's a phenomenal mind in the world of functional medicine and well-being, but very practical, very evidence-based. And he kind of came up with this acronym called FIND SET, which is something, it's my go-to, especially in the wellness industry, where often patients arrive at our doorstep and there are multiple things wrong with them. You know, it's not just sinusitis. I mean, we wish. You know, you start doing the case, you start taking in that information, organizing all the data you get from it, and you actually understand it. But hang on, there are so many different metabolic pathways that have now been compromised. And it is almost impossible to just treat one thing. You almost have to treat the collective. And in order to then simplify things, Dr. Vasquez has this acronym called FIND SET. And literally, these are like the 7 modifiable factors that you can become aware of, connect with, and then action change, hopefully with a practitioner who can guide you. So the first thing is food. Food is definitely the easiest place for us to start any change. I mean, let food be thy medicine. I mean, we've heard that over and over and over. Hippocrates said that so many years ago, and yet still today, we might use food as a medicine, but we use the wrong foods to medicate. And it's really lost its punch, I think. I think if we understand, in terms of functional medicine, what we're really saying when we say that food is medicine is that there is an emerging field of science called nutrigenomics, which looks at how food influences our health. Because, you know, in functional medicine, that's what we do all the time. We want to know why and how. You know, nothing is just dinkum. It's like, no, like, why? Why is that like that? How come? How does it happen? And so we do the same with food. We want to know, well, what is it about food that changes the way people feel, changes the way they look, and can, in some instances, reverse persistent inflammatory conditions? And so that's where the field of nutrigenomics is born from, basically looking at how food interacts with our genetics and how it can program which genes we use in the body and which we don't, which are expressed and which are don't. So it doesn't really change our genetics as such, but it changes the way in which we use our genetics. Again, if your life was a movie and you are the main character in your movie, depending on the types of foods that you eat, you are either going to be writing a script for a horror movie, or you're going to be writing a script for the most awesome, epic self-discovery, love story, adventure. And that is what food can do. Food can literally change your reality, what you experience every day, what you show to the world. And you are the main character. So you benefit, you stand to benefit. So food is very important. And in terms of diet, people always want to know, well, which diet is the best diet? There really is no one size fits all. It really depends on what is uncovered in that initial case taking. That's why it takes so long with a functional medicine practitioner. But typically it's going to be modeled on a modified paleo diet. Dr. Vasquez says paleo/Mediterranean, so we can add dark chocolate and wine for those people who absolutely need something. But more importantly, a supplemented diet, supplemented paleo/Mediterranean. And the reason we say supplemented is because away from food, the other letter in fine set in nutrition is about reestablishing nutritional balance and addressing nutritional deficiencies, depletions that we may have. And we are very fortunate today that we have amazing nutraceuticals that can do that for us in a very short space of time. So in terms of the supplemented paleo, what we regard as a baseline to supplement with a paleo Mediterranean style diet would be a daily multivitamin and mineral. Now, you know the phytomulti, which is the go-to standard multiple in the Metagenics range. And phytomulti is different to a normal multivitamin mineral because what phytomulti has incorporated is the essence of nutrigenomics, where they've taken the substances in food, included it in that multiple, so that we can begin to change gene expression with that multiple. So we're basically adding what you're doing with the diet by changing your diet and getting all those phytonutrients and those different elements in your diet, changing your gene expression. It is now also carried through in your daily multiple in the form of phytomulti, because ultimately food is information. It's information to our body, and it changes the way our genes are used. And you want a multiple that's going to extend that for you. And that's what phytomulti does. And then he also recommends omegas, which most of us know. And most people typically are on an omega. But again, that could be another talk. And we need to talk about the different oils out there and which ones are the ones we should really be taking, which ones are the ones we should be avoiding. But fish oils, if we just put omega-3 out there, that would be a bare essential for most people to take. There is a cacophony of science supporting the use of omega-3 in basically inflammation. And if we consider that the root cause of aging, and when I'm saying aging, I'm talking inflammaging, where you age in a bad way, you get disease, you get inflamed, you get sore, you lose mental faculty. All of that, the foundation of that is runaway inflammation in the body, inflammation that doesn't serve a purpose, because inflammation is needed, but it can't be runaway inflammation. And so your omegas are one of the easiest ways, combined with a diet, for you to achieve a measure of control of that inflammation in your body. Not to mention for women, especially the hormone benefits of being on an omega. So many women are depleted, especially after childbirth, especially after having children. Dr. Oscar Serelak, who's a practitioner in Australia, says that he has seen women in his practice at 10 years post having their kids, they are still in postpartum depletion. And one of the cornerstones is omegas. So omegas are definitely very important. And then I would say a probiotic should form part of your foundation. We used to, well, if you eat a varied diet, a diet that's diverse in
so
all
can
kinds of food.
Can I interrupt there?
Yes.
Because I think it's important that we describe somehow what the diet, you know, so paleo and modified Mediterranean,
Yes.
like that's can be quite abstract for some people, but
Yes.
I have a few things that I think people really shouldn't have, but maybe we should just sort of talk about what are the things that people definitely should include every day as part of the food that they eat, or the quality of food that they eat.
So Eat the Rainbow is probably the best place to start. So every day people should ensure that they have a color spectrum in their diet. What we don't want to do is for people to start eating the same foods over and over, even if they are healthy. The whole point of Paleo-Mediterranean is the diversity of color, eating the rainbow. So that's kind of like a slogan that we use in the functional medicine and nutrition world, eat the rainbow. So if people can simply just start there, look at the plate in front of you. What are the colors? And I can tell you now, for the majority of people, it's going to be white or beige or brown. They need to change that. So they need to simply go out and find colorful, typically plant-based. It's going to be mainly plant-based because, as far as I know, meat is typically one color. So you're going to be adding the color automatically then from your fruits and veg, but predominantly vegetables. We don't want to go overboard with fruit. I mean, there are certain fruits that are absolutely great, but you don't want to go overboard on fruit in the early stages simply because of the sugar issue. But you want to avoid grains. Legumes are also a problem for many people. So again, these are just guidelines because some people grow up on legumes and they're fine with legumes. Other people, you add legumes into the diet, they don't do very well. With some people, you add farinaceous foods like your brassicas, your broccoli, and your cauliflower, and they struggle with it. They cannot, they become bloated, they become crampy. Now, that's why I said the probiotic is so important, because your probiotic will help you to digest all these starches and fibers and all these new plants that you're going to be introducing on your plate. That's why we say supplement with the probiotic, because it actually helps you to digest that and use it, more importantly. But basically eating the rainbow, including as many veg as you possibly can, but with an avoidance of grains and the modified
Let's talk
Mediterranean
about
diet.
grains.
Yes.
Because I mean, it's typically when I say to somebody, I want you to stop eating bread and refined carbohydrates, they look at me like I've just told them they're never allowed to eat again. I think people have a staple food that's bread, and for me, and it's been decades that I stopped eating bread, and I still feel that if somebody is unwell or if they want to get better, that is the one sabotage almost. It's the one thing that typically always stands in the way of us getting them to shift out of ill health into better health. So for me, the grains, pasta, some people can get away with if their digestive system allows it, and because it's a simple recipe. But I mean, it's unfortunate that bread just isn't, it's not the friend of most people these days, and especially if we're looking at gut health and cognitive health.
Yes. And again, I mean, there's, like you said before, some people can get away with pasta, some people can get away with bread, but I want to challenge that narrative, because I think it was Dr. Tom Saltz at one of the Applied Functional Medicine and Clinical Practice Symposiums had said that in his gluten intolerant patients, celiac patients, in fact, not even just gluten intolerant, that they can experience symptoms outside their gut for up to 10 years before they experience their first gut symptom, and they are celiac. And he says, even in his patients who are not gluten intolerant or they're not celiac, he still removes bread, for instance, or gluten. Gluten was the main thing. And that they experience an improvement, some of them in 60% of their symptoms. And so the issue around bread is complicated, because number one, we're not talking artisanal bread, and we're not talking, like you're somewhere in Provence, France, and you're eating those kinds of flours and artisanal breads. We're talking about the everyday bread that you go and buy from your supermarket. There's very little in that bread that's alive and that's serving you. Apart from the fact that it's a grain, and grains are pro-inflammatory, it's grain-based, it's also too high in its carbohydrate. The carbohydrate type of carbohydrate you get from bread is pro-inflammatory. And so really, from a nutritional perspective, it's not an essential item for us to consume to have energy, to feel well. We really only have a taste bud connectedness to bread, a feeling of satiety, a feeling of comfort. There really is no purpose for us to have bread.
Yeah, and maybe it's convenient.
It's very convenient, and it soothes. It's a medication for many people. It's what they use to soothe anxiety, depression, fatigue. But unfortunately, like most medicines, prescriptive medications, it's a mitochondrial disruptor because it's going to go and create a scenario where your gut becomes permeable. It's going to promote inflammation, and that is going to have huge effects for you later on. And because the effects are often not in the gastrointestinal tract, it could be headaches, it could be migraines, it could be issues with sleeping, it could be completely unrelated, it could be immune health, it could be fatigue, and people don't connect the dots. So as to understand that when you experience a symptom anywhere in the body, chances are a lot of the root cause of that comes from the gut and what goes into the gut. And grains are unfortunately, things like, so I grew up with oats being kind of like the go-to, like you have oats in the morning before school, it's a healthy food. But actually, when we take a closer look at oats, oats are loaded, for instance, with things like phytic acid. And phytic acid is an anti-nutrient. So I'm not saying people shouldn't eat oats, but they should certainly look at focusing more on the other stuff, rather than making your grains a big staple. Again, if you have small amounts of a lot of different things, your body's better able to work its way through that than having large amounts of much fewer food groups. So that's where the whole removal of grain, like you said. So like Italians, for instance, who grow up on pasta, and they have their pasta with olive oil, and that's it. And they will eat bowls of pasta and they won't gain weight and they won't feel fatigued and they will cope. But it's the quality that they produce over there, and it's also growing up with it, and it's also the lifestyle, because away from that pasta, it's very much Mediterranean. There's very much diversity. So the microbiome is in place to deal with whatever they do. So, unfortunately for us, with our SAD diets, our westernized SAD diets, sometimes we have to experience the pain of elimination. But understand that for every food that you eliminate, there's probably 3 or 4 you can add. So it really isn't elimination as much as it is addition of all the other colorful things on your plate. And like I say, we include Mediterranean, so you can have dark chocolate and you can have your odd glass of red wine. So it's really not that bad. I think people kind of put the cart in front of the donkey and they kind of scare themselves away, but it's really not that bad.
No, it's not. And also what I find really encouraging is that the more diverse your food choices are, the more diverse your microbiome will be.
Yes.
So if you're eating a diet and you're always eating the same food and never bringing in any change or diversity, then the microbiome, the gut, and the diversity of microbes in the gut will also show that it's almost a limitation.
Yes. And what we know about that term diversity is that in terms of diet, studies have shown very clearly that it's diversity in the diet, micronutrient, macronutrient component, phytonutrient component, that ultimately leads to the best gene expression. So, even if you're just eating broccoli every night, but that's it, ultimately you're going to have to get to the point where that interconnectedness to yourself and to your well-being gives you the courage to, okay, I'm going to try some other colors on my plate. I'm going to add other veggies onto my plate. That's really what it is. It's the diversity that actually equals or eventually helps us down that path to optimization. So that's where people need to understand eating the rainbow is about diversity. It's not just about the same food group over and over and over. If you just have the same green smoothie every morning, it's not diverse enough. And we were not meant to eat like that anyway. We meant to be seasonal and we meant to have different things in all the time. And I also think it makes the journey a little bit more interesting and easier when you're looking at it from what are the things I can eat? Because there's certainly more things you can eat than the things you can't.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you want to go back to the set.
So to the 7 modifiable things. So food is absolutely the place to start. And if people are overwhelmed, it is nice to find a practitioner who will work with them and say, okay, this is what we can do for you. Let's start slowly and I'll guide you along the way, and we'll see how you feel, and we go with what works for you. Okay. And then obviously infection. So the I in FIND-SET is infection or dysbiosis. So we've just mentioned now, a diverse diet is going to support a diverse microbiome. So again, if there's no diversity in your diet, you land up with a microbiome that is not diverse enough to protect you. And to behave in the way that it should behave, because your microbes are actually there to serve you. They're there to digest your food and help you extract nutrients from them. But more often than not, when patients do arrive at our doorstep, there is a degree of dysbiosis going on. They have the wrong kinds of bacteria growing, anywhere from the stomach all the way through to the large bowel, sometimes even on their skin, as we see in psoriasis. There could be a dysbiosis on the skin. But dysbiosis is a very real thing, and I think it is a product of poor food choices, and then obviously the environment that we live in that's just not conducive to the growth of healthy microbes. You think about antibiotics in food, for instance. How many patients have you seen that have been on course after course after course of antibiotic? That coupled with a diet that's not diverse, that's sad. It makes sense that there will be dysbiosis. We understand the why, okay? But so that's where we say that diversity is key. The microbiome is absolutely important, and we often as practitioners have to address the microbiome, and that's where your probiotic can come in. But certainly where dysbiosis is concerned, there's often a need for elimination, and particularly fermentable foods. So something like a FODMAP diet, even keto diet, would then be a therapeutic diet that you would use in that space where you remove all fermentable carbohydrates. But infection also, so infection is an interesting thing, because many people walk around with infections, subclinical infections they're not aware of. I mean, you do bloods and you find that, well, there's an Epstein-Barr, or there's something going on. ESR is raised for this patient, CRP is raised, but they're not necessarily feeling unwell. And this is where, or they're not necessarily symptomatic. And this is where I say wellness is not just the absence of symptoms. How many times have we seen markers of inflammation and infection raised in patients who are not necessarily acutely symptomatic? And infections often drive even autoimmune conditions. And it's definitely something that we always, as functional medicine practitioners and in the field of functional medicine, always consider the role that infections play. But short of just putting people on antibiotics, what we rather do is get the immune system booted, and that's the gut. Because as you know, that's the headquarters for the immune system. And then obviously nutrition we've spoken about before. That's why we're supplementing with omegas and phytomultis. And this is why having targeted nutraceuticals that are precisely matched for your needs can also be a great add-on. So away from the basic supplementation, sometimes you do need a high dose N-acetylcysteine to stop runaway inflammation. In the case of lupus, for instance, NAC is an amazing nutraceutical that stops that inflammatory activation, that stops that persistent inflammation. So sometimes we do need very specific, very precision-based nutraceuticals to support what we're trying to do with food. But what we ultimately try and do is get people off that. We don't really want to replace a list of prescriptive medicines for a massive protocol of nutraceuticals, because nobody wants to wake up and say, well, it's going to take me about half an hour to work my way through all my pills, okay? But sometimes people do need things for anywhere from 3 to 6 months just to come in from the therapeutic angle and cement what we're trying to do with diet. And diet can change genetic expression quite quickly. In some studies that they've done, even on type 2 diabetics, we see changes in genetic expression within 6 days of changing the way they eat. But now couple that with precision nutraceuticals, like something like phytomulti, where you actually enhance the action of that gene talk and that gene expression. What we ultimately want to do is get the person feeling as well as we can, as quick as we can, so that we can go back and just rely on a basic diet with basic nutraceuticals to support them. Then looking at the other D in FIND-SET is dysfunction of the mitochondria. So mitochondropathies, as we call them, or leaky mitochondria, are a very real thing. And if you had to take any persistent or chronic disease right down to cellular level, what you'll actually find is sick or ill mitochondria. So the mitochondria are, as you know, the powerhouses, the batteries in each cell, and each cell will have thousands of them. And they are responsible for changing the carbohydrates and the fats and sometimes proteins that we eat into energy. So if they don't work, then we are not able to nourish ourselves. We're not able to produce energy. We're not able to experience wellness. And so a huge aspect that's overlooked, I think, in orthodox medicine is the mitochondrial role. And if you consider that most prescriptive medications are mitochondrial disruptors, they are not grateful. They might help with an acute scenario, or they might help with symptom relief. But ultimately, underneath all of that seeming improvement are mitochondria that are getting sicker and sicker and more leaky by the day. And when you have enough mitochondria that are damaged and you're not doing anything to repair them, the cell ultimately will die. And that's where we start seeing end organ damage. So for instance, in diabetes, where patients who have type 2, ultimately, because they have such intense glucose metabolism disruption, that is so poisonous to the mitochondria. Eventually, as the mitochondria begin to become ill, cells will then die. And that's where you start seeing changes in the eye, changes in the kidney, that end organ damage that we talk about. So mitochondropathies do require someone who knows a little bit about mitochondrial resuscitation, where we can selectively feed those mitochondria, stop the inflammation, protect them. One of the things that is so crucial for mitochondrial health is your omega-3. So, and this is why we include it as part of the foundation, because the DHA in the omega-3 literally forms part of the structure of the mitochondria. So if you don't have DHA, your mitochondria aren't happy, and this is why you get tired when you don't take omegas. But mitochondrial health is a big aspect of what we do in our programs with patients. And then if we move on from the endocrine health, so hormone health is a huge factor. Hormones affect us generally. And I don't think there's any woman on this planet that would disagree with that statement, but our hormones to a large degree determine how we feel, determine how our body weight is set, our metabolism, determine how we feel about ourselves, determine how we feel about the world out there. And so part of encouraging that healthy connectedness is to address hormone health. And so for most patients, that simply means eating a diet that's very low or devoid of hormone disruptors. So foods that have traditionally huge amounts of antibiotics and hormones and things added to them are foods that we should be avoiding. Even with dairy, I'm not saying avoid dairy, but there are dairy alternatives out there from cows that are not pumped with additional hormones that are actually better for your hormone health. So avoiding things unnecessary like the pill or hormone replacement therapy. You know, look for ways we can nurture our body before we go the hormone disruptor route. The other thing is plastics, BPA. We are bombarded with that on a daily basis, and those things have a direct impact on our hormones, especially as women. Sugar consumption, excess carbohydrate consumption influences our estrogen. And so there are a lot of things we can do just by eating clean, avoiding those hormone disruptors, talking to a practitioner who can guide us through these are typical hormone disruptors. Let's avoid as many of them as we can. But hormone health is essential. And then stress management. Oh goodness. So stress, even on the World Health Organization's page, conditions related to stress are basically the #1 conditions in the world today, and depression has the highest incidence in the world today. It's the #1 disease today, trumps cardiovascular disease. And so how we feel and how we manage through challenges is an extremely important part of the healing process and wellness. And the good thing is that in functional medicine terms, we are able to support the stress response. We're able to educate and we're able to support the stress response. Sometimes we can't change the stressor. If you're in a job, for instance, that's making you unhappy, it's understanding that, well, I need that job now to meet my financial commitments. Okay, so you can't tell the person, will just leave your job. But what we can say is, what are the specifics about your job that impact you? And how can we mitigate those specifics? So what it will do then is help that person stay in that situation for longer before they start experiencing breakdown as a result of stress, before they just literally become bathed in fight or flight hormones on a continuous basis. But there are ways we can coach. And so with functional medicine coaching, for instance, we are very aware that patients need more than just a protocol and off they go. We literally, as you know, we become partners to our patients. They rely on us. We can coach them through, we can talk them through, and we can help them find ways to manage it. But away from that, in the herbal world, in the vitanutrient world, there are many things we can use that could lessen the impact of stress hormones and literally shift us out of fight or flight. I mean, sleep.
Yeah, for me, the whole fight, the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, this whole thing of fight or flight has become actually a crucial part of my first consultation with my clients now. And I'm almost surprised that it's not something that I discussed with them more often previously, even though we talked about stress and that. But I think there's been such a public presence now, more and more so, where the benefits of breathing or cold water immersion or vagus nerve activation to get us out of fight or flight and into that rest digest state, and just teaching people about the simple things that they can do to move them into a state where they can actually get better. Because it's not surprising for somebody who's constantly in that survival mode, in that fight or flight, in that war zone, where the body really only prioritizes survival. Its only concern is with survival. It doesn't actually care about your immune system. It doesn't care about your gut. It doesn't care about anything else. Its main concern is survival. So now this client will say, but I'm not getting better. I'm not getting better. And typically that person hasn't done anything to spend some time in that parasympathetic state where the body can say, right, now I can channel this energy to heal and to repair and to prioritize the digestive system and rest, you know, like that's where the sleep also comes in. So we've got to get people to sleep if we want them to get better.
For sure. And again, it comes back to my understanding of wellness, which it requires a connectedness and an awareness. So most people are not even aware of how stressed, or they don't place sufficient emphasis on stress. Because again, stress, and the more stressed you are, is something that to a large degree, even with our awareness today, is still rewarded by society. You know, if you're very stressed and you're very busy and you're doing more than the person next to you, we give you that unseen badge. There really is a stigma attached to mental health, mental well-being, saying things like, I am not coping. I need to change something. I cannot do this anymore. So people are not even, most people that we see are not even prepared to admit that to themselves. No, I'm not really stressed. And then you do a stress evaluation on them and you find that actually you are. Your stress, your fight or flight response is just something that you become so accustomed to that you don't know how else to be. And what you said is so important about rest and digest. When you're in fight or flight the whole time, the gastrointestinal system it goes on standby. So a very important part of your functioning and your well-being gets put on standby. and it's not actually doing what it's meant to do for you. And so this is why chronic stress eventually down the line will lead to weakened resistance to infections, because your immune system, which requires a healthy gut, becomes impacted by it. And so there's definite causation between chronic stress and ultimately chronic inflammation and ill health. And I think people need to just be honest about that first, and then understand, well, what is it that I can do? Now, not everybody is going to suddenly take up yoga or breathing, or, you just have those types where, I'm not really into the auxiliary side of things. So this is where your nutraceuticals and good nutrition come into play, because a solid diet can go far away at supporting you coming back to baseline in between your stressful events. Eating foods that are pro-inflammatory, that irritate the gut lining, irritate the brain, cause excitatory glutamate to be released, are foods that are not going to allow you to go into that calm state in between. But all of us need to sleep. And so that's often a good place to start, is just to get people to sleep well. Again, it's not about how many hours of sleep you get necessarily. It's about making sure that when you sleep, you're cycling through the sleep pattern so that you wake up refreshed and ready for the day. Because contrary to belief, there's a lot of things that happen actively in our sleep cycles, even in our immune system. There are things that change in our immune system in terms of the type of immune cells that are found in our blood during sleep stages. And it is very important for us to sleep well so that we are well the next day. And that's often the first place we have to start. So supplementing again with a foundation product like magnesium at night, for instance, is very good. It's a very good way to start, tap into, well, let me help get into that relaxation mode. But certainly there are many auxiliary things that we can try. One of them is laughing. Laughing stimulates the vagus nerve. Singing, when you're in the shower, singing stimulates your vagus nerve. In fact, I myself, when I feel slightly tense, often I'll just start humming or singing. It's almost like a subconscious way that your body's trying to stimulate that vagus. So that you can just bring yourself down. So it doesn't always have to be found in the bottom of a nutraceutical or prescriptive medication. Certainly there are auxiliary ways, and seeing a practitioner that can guide you through what your options are, short of sleep therapy. But stress plays a huge role in our longevity. Simply put, the longer we stay in fight or flight, the shorter our lifespan. So it's a very pro-oxidative state to stay in, and we were not meant to live in fight or flight. We're meant to fight or flight and then rest. And unfortunately for many patients, that's not the case. They are just surviving every day. And if you're surviving, there is no way you're going to thrive. And it's understanding we can't always change the stress, but we can certainly support the person in that stressful situation. Then the last thing will be toxins and detoxification, which I don't have to tell you anything about. I mean, you're so well versed in your detox, but yes, again, the word detoxification is like the word wellness. I think people have heard it, so many times, and really, what does it mean? And does it mean I have to take expensive things and feel really bad and eat rabbit food and, No, it doesn't. Detoxification simply means that we're putting in more of the good things than we are of the bad things, because when you have the good things coming in, they help your body to get rid of the bad things. Ideally, we would like people to reduce the amount of bad things they take. Sorry, the dogs are making noise. But, if a person decides simply that tomorrow I'm going to be including more whole foods, different color foods in my diet, that will facilitate detoxification, because the pigments in those foods will switch on genes that support detoxification. So that's really what detox is about. And then guided detox is where you zone in and you amplify the process, and are always best done with a practitioner so they can watch you during the detoxification process. But toxins are a huge why as to why people get sick today, and most often they're not even aware of it. And you don't necessarily have to do expensive tests to determine which toxins there are. simply by alkalinizing their urine, getting it above 6.6, we know that they're in a state where they're going to be eliminating toxins, especially heavy metals. Simply making sure that there's no constipation, that people are having 2 stools a day, we know that they're eliminating. By providing whole foods, we are going to be switching on genes that help the liver, help the kidney to process toxins. And by providing probiotics or supporting a healthy microbiome with foods that aid the growth of good bacteria, you are also going to make a huge impact in, for instance, detoxification with hormone-related substances. So probiotics are essential for women because they help us to detoxify bad estrogens in the body. So again, you know, this is not some hidden secret. It's things that we all know, and it's things that we've heard, but it can be overwhelming in the beginning to consider, well, cheapers, I have to do all of these things, but start somewhere. And then the results will motivate you to carry on going. And it's a process that you refine as you go through the years of your life. And sometimes this will work for you. And then sometimes you have to change gears slightly because then now there's an uphill, the terrain has changed and your needs are slightly different. But fundamentally, those 7 things, those 7 modifiable factors, we can do something about. Yeah. You know, disease doesn't have to be this mystery.
And if we just address some of each of those, yes. You know, and it doesn't have to happen straight away. If I think of toxic burden, just by becoming mindful about labels that you read, for example, you know, the cleaning products that you use in your home or the personal care products that you use, if you just start looking at, okay, what is in here and does my body know what to do with it? Yes. So slowly but surely, as you run out of one thing, you're replacing it with something that is less harmful for you, less harmful for the environment.
For sure.
And then the same with your food. If you start replacing highly processed foods with lots of flavorants and colorants and preservatives, and slowly but surely. So in a month, in 2 months, after 6 months, and after a year, you've now reduced your toxic burden significantly. So your body is not fighting so hard against this challenge in order for it to break through and shift. And that's what's also so encouraging for me when I think about changing that idea around toxicity. It's not that you just do one detox for the week or for the month, you know, and you feel terrible. It's that you look at all the factors that contribute to your daily toxin exposure, and you just start slowly but surely eliminating those or changing those, and then actually making a big difference, not just to yourself, but also to the environment. So it's a mindset, and it's a conscious choice of, you know, if I'm not going to eat something, why would I want to put it on my skin? Why would I want to wash my clothes on it, kind of thing? So it's just a different awareness, and it's something one can get to. You don't have to every day throw away everything that's in your cupboard. You can just slowly but surely get there and help
I think it's so important to understand that some people, the inclination is more natural. They question it. You know, what's in here? What is it going to do? Unfortunately, a large percentage of patients or people out there don't think that way. They believe it when they see the cereal advert, and in the advert it says 9 vitamins and minerals and energy. You know, so they, in their mind, they think, well, it's energy. It's got 9 vitamins and minerals. Of course, I'm going to give that to my children every day. Of course, I'm going to eat that cereal every day. And so I don't think it's necessary that people just don't care. I think that there's also misrepresentation. And it really, what it is, and this is why even in what we do as practitioners, it is a partnership where we're trying to get patients to connect with themselves, and not just with us, but connect with yourself and ask yourself, well, is it processed? You know, is this from, can you, so Dr. Vasquez says, if you can walk into your back garden and pick it off a tree, you can have it. So if you can, if suddenly the cereal tree grows somewhere and boxes of cereal grow in the tree, by all means go and grab a box of cereal and have it. And we're not saying that necessarily because we were trying to be facetious. It's trying to get people to understand that if something is highly processed, it's likely that there are things in there that are going to add to the body's burden rather than feed the body. And what we want to do ultimately with food is we want to eat less but nourish more. Because what we're doing right now is we're eating too much, but we're not nourishing.
Nourishing.
We're actually eating too much, eating to the point of depletion.
Yeah, and it is again, it's ironic that we have so many obese people in the world, and yet there's so many malnourished people. So it's we're not well nourished, even though obesity is such an issue.
Yeah, and you know what, I will say this, I don't know what our time's like, but I want to just say this, is that for me, the power of food was illustrated with a particular study where they looked at how food impacts transgenerationally. So if I had a rand, maybe not a rand, maybe 5 rand, for every time a patient said to me, I don't have to smoke, I don't have to cut out sugar. My granny drank 3 teaspoons of sugar in her tea and smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and she lived until she was 96. You know, I think I could probably have a good retirement policy somewhere if I took every 5 rand I got from that and invested it. Because what people fail to understand, and this is what the study showed, is that your granny's behavior, the foods that she ate in particular, and the things that she exposed herself to, can be the effects of that will not be evident necessarily in her life, but her offspring, and more importantly, her offspring's offspring, so her grandchildren, will manifest that. So she's writing the script with the food choices she's making. Then she has a child, and that child starts to live out some of that script. But that person's child, if she doesn't change, if she carries on eating and she's got the script already, the grandchild will then basically bring that picture to the forefront. So the children, the grandchildren express the diseases from 3 generations ago. And you are eating now, if you're a young female or male, you are eating now for your grandkids' sake. And that's the power of food. And that is why, you know, I think what we're trying to get across in terms of our relationship with the patients and teaching them about functional nutrition is that nutrition is a very important function of who you are as a human being with mental, emotional, spiritual, physical aspects. And that is the most important function that you need to get right on this earth if you want to begin to experience well-being. And more importantly, you're doing it for for generations to come. So if not for yourself, don't light that cigarette for your grandchild's sake. You know, that's what we do in practice now with patients really will only come to fruition really in the 3rd generation. So we won't even be here maybe to experience the fruits of our efforts, but ultimately it's those little people that come out the other side that will reap the benefits. Transgenerational effects. It's a huge field in nutritional science right now, looking at those effects and how they get taken across generations.
But I hope, if nothing else, I mean, you've said so much, I almost want to go and make notes and watch this video again. This is a recording and we're going to be sharing it. I will share it on Facebook. I'll share the link on Instagram. And I really hope that you felt inspired by watching this to just go and review. Where can I make some small changes? Where can I think about food differently? How can I consider my investment that I'm making into my health and that of my children and my grandchildren one day? And by sharing this video, you might be teaching somebody else something that they haven't heard or that they need to hear today. So I want to thank Natasha for your time and your incredible wisdom and just the wonderful way in which you share your knowledge. It's really inspirational, and I know it's going to affect change and hopefully many who watch here.
Thank you.
I will, in the recording link, I will also just drop the link to my Metagenics online store. If you do want to go and browse and have a look at the nutrients that you can buy and get delivered, it's very convenient. You buy directly from this store. You just create a profile for your own account, place your order. There is a 10% discount that applies, and the products get delivered directly to you. You can also look at my Instagram and Facebook accounts, Emma Mentel Health Practitioner. I think on Instagram it's emma.mentel. I try to share all kinds of interesting things. I've got some courses coming up. Starting tonight, it's the fasting course, and then tomorrow it's a gut health course. So I really want to spend time on educating people so that they can ultimately go and make different choices. And the more we know, the more we empower ourselves with knowledge, the better we can be. So that's the goal, is to get people to really take charge of their own health. I'm just going to find this URL and put it in the comments while we still live. Just want to make sure that I do that properly in the chat. There we go. That should show. Right. So we're done for today. I hope that we'll be back soon with another topic. There's quite a few things that we said we can spend days and days on. So we will for sure keep you all posted about the next topic in our next discussion. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Em. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.